Hi, everybody. This is Laura from the IAB team. Welcome to today's really exciting webinar. As you're aware, IAB Southeast Asia and India have commenced a webinar series, which we're calling Revolve Webinars, and we are absolutely stoked at who we have today. Today's topic is the real-life application, digital disruption, change is the only constant. So I am delighted to now introduce to you our speakers. So if we move to the next slide, please. Great. I would like to introduce you to Dawn Chan, who is International Business Director, South China Morning Post, and also who is a regional board member of the IAB Southeast Asia and India, and she will take you through today. Over to you, Dawn.
Thank you very much, Laura. I think you might have a bit of echo in the background, so I hope everybody can hear me well. Otherwise, do send us a little chat, maybe in the Q&A, and then we'll have an idea about how to fix our IT. But thank you everyone for joining today. Thank you, Laura, for introducing. Hope you are keeping well, whichever country you are in. These are special times, so that's why today's topic is around, something that we can actually show you how, as a company at SCMP, we've applied some real-life changes, especially in the face of digital disruption, as well as a global pandemic. Now, I'm not sure how many of you have been in media for the past 20 years on this call, but for myself, I can say that in my 20 years, I've never once witnessed 1 year where nothing has changed. And I think that really, really continues for us, especially under these current circumstances. In fact, I remember one of my now retired ex-bosses explained to me how newspapers were published using letterpress. Fast forward to today, and publishers, even those like us who still have a print publication, we could not do without the latest tools in AI and big data. So with these world events, there's many changes that have actually been accelerated, and SCMP is not immune like many of the companies out there. So today, I'm very, very pleased to welcome our head of digital, Ian Hawking, who will share about how embracing change is really the best business practice. We thought it important to first share the why and the what. And the format will be in a quick slideshow before we move on to having a discussion on how we came to launch new products and how the South China Morning Post, as a company who is still undergoing massive transformation these last 3 years, chooses to deal with this change. So make sure to stay tuned to the end. Even after the presentation, we still have more interview type questions. And if you have any of your own questions, please feel free to ask away in the Q&A. I'll make sure to address as many as we can. So I think with that being said, I'd love to welcome Ian Hawking. If you can please start with your presentation. I'm sure everybody is excited to hear what you have to say today.
Hi, thank you, Dawn, and thank you, Laura. It's really fantastic to be here and join everybody to share a little bit about how SCMP iterates and creates new products, because I think that iteration is the default position for publishers. So the agenda today looks a little like this. We're going to first off just let you know a little bit about SCMP and who we are for those of you that may be less familiar with ourselves. Next, we'll talk about a project that's really important to us, the Trust Project, and how that stimulated us to think about the way that users perceived our content. We'll then go on to talk about sentiment, keywords, and context. Finally, readability, before we start to think about, having built some fantastic tools internally, how we could apply those to more applications across the business, eventually recognizing its potential within brand safety. Finally, we'll also talk a little bit about the findings that we've had from launching these tools over the last month or so. So without further ado, this is the South China Morning Post. SCMP is based in Hong Kong, where we have about 1,000 people working for us. And we also have offices in Singapore, where Dawn is, and some in China as well. We primarily report on China and have been the newspaper record for Hong Kong for over a century. One thing that is incredibly important to us is our editorial motto, and that is truth and fairness. We truly believe that there's never been a more important time for news media and being able to share what is really important and happening around the world. And the South China Morning Post is uniquely positioned to do that here in Asia. So this idea of truth and fairness led us to think about how do we convey these important editorial mottos to our readership. And we're really pleased to announce that we were the first Asian publisher to join the Trust Project. This is a collective of platforms and publishers that stand for truth, honesty, and integrity in what they write and publish and share. And they bring with them a set of rules of engagement, sort of a code of conduct for the way that we should present our media to people, so that they understand what it is that is being said to them, who's saying it to them, and what affiliations or agendas or point of view they may be bringing to that conversation. And we feel that if you really understand who it is that's talking to you and how that information was brought to you, then you can really build trust in that environment. And so all of these great publishers and platforms you can see around have also joined the Trust Project, alongside many more. And we would actively encourage any publishers watching to consider also joining this, because when you build trust, then you also build great audiences as well. So the Trust Project for us means a lot of different things. We now include author biographies on SCMP so that you know who it is that's talking to you and what their background was. We also label our content. So it's clear that if it is some news or opinion, but also if it's some sort of sponsored or paid for content as well, which is also really important in building that trust. We also commit to having diverse voices, so making sure that we properly represent the industry, but also contributors from across the world. So this Trust Project started us to really think about how people perceive our content on the page. This is incredibly important when we consider the things that we write about. One of the biggest stories over the last year for us has been the Hong Kong protests, an incredibly important thing, not just for Hong Kong, but the whole world, as this huge transition happens between Hong Kong and China. So we published something in the order of 1,500 articles in the last year about the Hong Kong protests, and they've been really diverse, and they've taken it from the first action that was taken right up to today. And we wondered how people that were reading this content perceived it when they read it. And that led us to think about sentiment and sentiment analysis. We wanted to understand that when somebody read an article, what did that article make somebody feel? And when I think about sentiment, I want to be clear that what we're saying here is we analyze the content and try to figure out what people are feeling, not necessarily how that person feels. So what should that content engender in the person? Negative sentiment isn't always bad. Imagine that scathing movie review, or a writer taking apart the game that happened last night. Some of that content, that negative content, can be the most engaging, enjoyable content for readers to be with. But obviously, there's great correlation to positive content and balanced neutral content as well. So we developed an NLP tool that will allow us to read the sentiment of headlines. And we did this across not just the SCMP, but a cohort of 14 different publishers. And we specifically looked at the headlines that people were writing around the Hong Kong protests. And so we got to effectively mark and understand how other news publishers were presenting Hong Kong protests to the world. The scale we used went from -1 for very negative to +1 for very positive. And as you can see here, the results are in front of you. Everybody, in the end, was a little bit negative with the headline in terms of sentiment. Some, just a little bit, the ones on the left-hand side of the screen, starting at 1, a little bit toward neutral, and then toward 14, most negative. But remember, this went to -1, so that's still somewhere in the middle. And you can see SCMP here at position 9, kind of middle of the pack. Now, this was really interesting to us because we had written a huge number. The sample size in total was about 3,500 articles, and SCMP had written over 1,500 of those. And so for us to have maintained such a midpoint in the cohort was really interesting, and I think speaks to how conscientious our editors were about writing things in a neutral way. So we were really excited by these initial results, and it seemed to be really worth our time to think about this. So we wanted to apply it a little bit further and take it beyond headlines and start to think about the body text of our articles. And that's what we did next. So our data team developed a tool that allowed us to get into the body text of an article. Here we have a snippet from one that was called "The World Must Unite to Fight Against Coronavirus." This title sounds like it could be a little controversial, may even be a little negative in tone. And when we read it, we can see that, yes, indeed, there are 11 negative words in this snippet that we have. But there are 10 positive words and 5 neutral words within this article. And so actually it balances out as being much more neutral than it is negative. And then when we use the NLP to scan it and really think about context, so building from keywords now into context, we can find that 50% of the articles actually positive content, only 10% was negative in context, and 40% was neutral in context. So in fact, we now swing the article more towards lightly positive, which is a completely different classification. And this becomes really important in the way that we view all of our articles. We have now effectively marked every single article we have written online. And we have a scoring and rating system for every single one. And we've integrated the tools that allow us to understand this directly into our CMS. So our CMS is something that the technology team at SCMP have built as well, as they see that as central and core technology. So now when an editor writes the content, they can understand immediately whether or not the article they're writing is perceived as positive or negative or neutral. So this being such an interesting insight into the way that users perceive us, we thought about how could we extend this? How could we build out that functionality a little bit further? And we started to think about readability. And this is super interesting. This is how easy is that article to read once it's published. And we start at the bottom of this graph. And this is a real graph of all of the content that we've produced over the last year at SCMP. The green is written at a level that is easy enough to comprehend if you're in the 5th, 6th, or 7th grade of school. That's the equivalent of a romance novel, so super easy for people to understand. The blue sections are secondary and high school, so pretty easy for people to get. And then the orange is at a college level. This is considerably harder. In fact, only a very small percentage of the world's population are educated to a college level. So this is really starting to become a complex piece. And then the red is a scientific journal, college graduate level piece of content. And as you can see, the SCMP typically are publishing between college and college graduate level content. In fact, over 50% of our content sits at that more complex level. And that's super interesting as a publisher because it tells us a little bit about who's engaging with it, how they might understand it, and how they might progress. So this led us to think about drilling down on those insights into specific editorial desks and for different content. You can see here, this is just a small section for different desks and content that we have. At the top of the page, you can see that when we talk about Asia over the last year, we've primarily been talking about it at a college level, but we have had a fair amount at a lower degree of sophistication. Down toward basketball, you can see everything is written at the 8th or 9th grade because people would assume that that should be easier. Let's think about China. China has the largest percentage here at the moment of college graduate level content. This is the most complex stuff, but it also has a fair amount at the secondary school level. These were likely to be explainers and easier content for people to understand. And right at the bottom, we have competitions. Competitions allow us to understand that everything here is written super easily, as you would expect. We now take this kind of insight and think about, if we write it in this way, who's going to be receptive to this content and how do they engage with our site? So we've started to overlay this insight with engagement statistics. So we can see how many page views per user we get after they read this sort of content. And what we found is really interesting. We found that if it is news or business, if we write at a college or college graduate level, we get a better engagement. They come back more frequently, they read more articles. But for light, easy content like lifestyle and sports, if we write at a easier to understand readability score, then we get a much better result from those users. And so now we're able to aim our product better at the users that come to SCMP and provide a better experience for them. So, of course, all these tools, we've covered quite a few things already. We've covered sentiment, context, readability, and engagement. And we wanted to think about a wider business purpose. At the moment, a lot of these have been contained within editorial, and we've started to migrate some of those tools over to funnel science, which for SCMP is conducted by our data science team. But we haven't really found any commercial uses for these things yet. And so we started to think about how we might do that. And if you remember, the first question we asked was, how do users see our content? If we ask the opposite and then we say, how do marketers see our content, then we get a completely different response. We start to think about brand safety, because that is the primary concern that a marketer would have about our content. And here we see the IAB study that recently came out showing that there's still plenty of confusion about how people should deal with this kind of content. And you can see that also varies by the vertical that a marketer may be working in, with FMCG and financial services being two of the areas that are most affected by this still. We find that this is a really present thing today, with COVID-19 making making a huge topic that is really affected almost every publisher, and the IAB and others calling for change in the way that we represent brand safety, which I think has evolved a lot over the years. Typically, brand safety tools right now are using keywords, which can be a little blunt. Just because you write one word that may fit in a list doesn't mean that whole article is suddenly unacceptable. It typically can be used multiple times down the supply path. So a DSP and a publisher might implement brand safety protocols, which could increase the costs to the buyer, which is less than ideal. If you apply really stringent brand safety tools, you can reduce your reach, especially on sites like news sites, which will typically be tackling those harder to talk about subjects. And if you aren't able to buy your audiences on those great premium sites, then you may be convinced to buy on the long tail in lower quality environments, which may lead to lower quality clicks. Then there occasionally can be some issues with the sampling technology, which means that the articles are slow to classify. And you could miss coverage in environments where brand safety tools aren't available, such as in-app when SDKs aren't available. So we thought that with the tools that we had built in sentiment, context, and readability, that we could potentially do a slightly more evolved job from some of the standard tools that are available. And so we launched last month a tool called SCMP Signal that aimed to try and combat some of those things. And so far, we started to see some really interesting signs from this. Articles that would have been blocked under keywords are now easier for us to monetize because we have a little more sophistication. And we can generally see about a 55% increase in the availability in those articles. And because we can now get into more articles, we also have seen an increase in reach, allowing marketers to reach, on average, 64% higher reach. And so this tool that we've built specifically for our users and our editorial team, hopefully now will have a really interesting impact on both the commercial side and the data funnel science side. And so that's broadly what we wanted to discuss today. I hope that's been an interesting journey for you all. And thank you for your time. I think we're now going to turn over to some Q&A.
Excellent. Am I back on? I think so. Sorry.
Go on.
Hi, everyone. Back to Dawn and Ian again. We're going to actually be having a few questions from me, actually. So pretend that there's a fireplace, roaring fireplace behind me, nice coals crackling, even though it's so hot in Singapore. But, let's just keep it casual. Ian, it's great that you have this new tool launched in the market, and that, as us as a publisher, and as I mentioned at the start, I've been in this line for like 20 years, have actually come up with something new, and that is, going to be impactful on the industry. So do you think, like, if we were to take it from a stance of how we have dealt with change, because this is something that's constant in our world especially, do you think that if the Hong Kong protests didn't happen, that this sentiment tool that we call Signal would not have ever been created?
I think it would have probably the genesis would have come from a different place. At this, because of what we were experiencing, we had this heightened sense that we wanted to understand how we were communicating with people. And so we started there. But if that stimulus wasn't there, it could well have come up from the, this publisher need that I think is felt by everyone, that they needed to be able to classify brand safety in a slightly more sophisticated way. So it absolutely could have come from there. I think the practice that people should think about is how can we leverage the skill sets and the tools that we're building in one part of our organization to benefit others. And the more that you can share insights and findings around your organization, the more likelihood there is that you can build something that is really impactful, not just for them, but for other people around as well.
Well said. And I think that you have been under a lot of pressure recently, because this is not the only new product that we are working on. Now, in your opinion, do you still think that it is a good timing that this new tool emerged from the Hong Kong protests, or would you rather have left it for later?
Oh, it's interesting. I think that the publishers in general should be front-footed about tackling industry problems, and as much as possible should share through forums like the IAB to help educate on where the issues are and come together to create solutions that work for the whole industry. I think we should be led by best practice and trying to drive the best possible performance for clients. But we can do this as a community. I think the time has passed when you can think about anyone in silos. The publishers and ad tech vendors should be working to build a positive and vibrant community for everybody and tackle industry problems as a community as much as possible.
That's a great segue into my next question, because I was wondering, when you were working on this new tool, what info did your research unearth in terms of how SCMP approached this compared to other publishers? And also, if you can compare it to existing brand safety providers in the market, without naming names, we just want to have a sense of like where exactly we're at, and how can we as an industry elevate the use of such tools towards best results.
Sure. So I think what's important here is that the issues that we described about brand safety, especially in relation to, say, the protests or COVID-19, these are industry problems that have affected certainly everyone in SEA and more widely across the world. And that it's really important that we evolve our technology along with the way that marketers want to buy. We were lucky that we found a great application out of some tools that we were building to offer a great level of service. But I believe this is something that everybody can have a positive part to play in. You may not be lucky enough to have some people in your organization to help you build tools, but you can have a voice. You can reach out to the IAB. You can submit articles to trade publications to build something that is better. I hope that by us bringing a product like this to the marketplace, we can demonstrate to everybody that there is another way to tackle this issue, and that with a little more sophistication, you can understand that actually news publishing and publishing around these hard news topics is actually still this incredibly vibrant, incredibly important place to be that can still deliver great engagement and great post-click attribution for campaigns. So I hope that we can just be a bit of a digital forward thinker, maybe help to show that here's one way that you could tackle this problem outside of some of the more classic ways, and start bring evidence and start a conversation with marketers and other brand safety vendors so that we bring the whole of our marketplace up to this new level that is a little bit more sophisticated.
So it sounds like you're kind of open to working with other publishers, in fact. Maybe, who knows, would you ever sell the tool that we created as a SaaS to other publishers so that we can elevate the industry together?
I don't think that's at all our mission here. We're not interested in creating some sort of SaaS product like this, but I would love to have conversations. If there's somebody watching this that thinks they would like to learn a little bit more about what NLP tools we were using and how we created the models, a lot of this stuff is actually, especially the algorithms, are standard and they're free in the marketplace and people can get hold of them. We would love to share more, get a little bit more technical with those that are really interested. I think SCMP, if anything, is saying that we want to support publishing. We want to support great content producers and help them provide an environment that is really fertile, that has great opportunities and regains some control in the ecosystem. And the more that we can promote that and help people, the better.
Excellent. Well, you will heard that out there. So if anyone wants to reach out to us, please let us know. We'll be happy to share what we can. And I know that internally, numerous departments from editorial to data team work together in SCMP to get such insight in order to build this tool. What is it like trying to get everyone in SCMP to work together?
Oh, wow. So that's a super good question. And I think that this starts off with how do you kick off a project like this? First of all, you need to understand the need. What is it you're trying to achieve? We had a really clear goal. We wanted to understand how users perceived our content when they read it. And we knew that was important because we had this editorial motto right at the beginning. So we could get everyone around and focus in and align to that one thing. We can say, we want to prove this, get everyone's buy-in because it's going to take time. It's going to take your attention away from other things that you could be doing, and understand that everyone's going to build toward that thing. As they build toward it, then you get to share the insights and the rewards with everybody. Then that's how you should begin these kind of journeys. If it's a little unfocused, if you don't really have buy-in, if people don't really understand and believe in the result that you're aiming for, then these projects can get washed away really easily. So, like the one thing I would say is spend your time at the beginning doing the education around your business and really, really cement on what it is you're supposed to be achieving in the first place. And that could be simple and small, but make sure that everyone really gets it, so everyone is aligned in the same way and pushing for the same goal.
So I'm hearing that you're saying that focus and clarity is really important and gets everybody pointing in the same direction as well. But if there was one thing that you could wish for to help improve the situation, what would it be?
Oh, with brand safety in general?
No, I think in terms of working internally, like other than focus and clarity, like would it be something else, like budgets or management support or something else even?
We're really lucky that there's a good deal of cross-department collaboration within SCMP, and the more you can engender that, the more you can get people to share insights and to have learning as the default position, the better you're going to be. Honestly, I think that we're incredibly fortunate here, and it's although this is a long path. This took us, like I think I said, 6 months to build this tool.
6 months for a new tool from a traditional media publisher is not long, in my opinion.
Yeah. Right, but so this process took us 6 months. That does involve a lot of time from a lot of different people, and it's heartening to see that people here are trying to focus up on these issues for us as a publisher, but also as a community. So I feel like we're pretty privileged, but if there's one thing, just keep everyone talking, keep that education going, keep a mode of learning within your organization, and that pathway becomes way smoother, and everyone sees the benefit.
So it's not even just about like having different departments and identifying a shared goal, but actually it's a lot about culture and values of the company, the staff that have learned that experimentation and learning is acceptable, and to some extent probably that it's okay to fail.
Oh yeah, you've got to be okay with failure.
All right.
For sure.
And I think I'll work in one of the Q&A from our audience. Since we're talking about failure and success, we have a question from the audience about our monetization strategy. So around the brand safety tool, first of all, I think I would add in, would a monetization strategy, would getting money immediately from this be a sign of success? And then secondly, to answer our audience question, what actually is this monetization strategy?
Oh, wow. So this is primarily about creating the most trusted environment for marketers, knowing that when they spend with us, that their brand is safe, but not just safe, that they're going to be in an amazing environment that's going to drive real tangible return on investment. So we don't have a revenue target for this tool, and I don't want to represent it in that way. This is about us saying, we would like to make the best possible environment for you in every way. And so the return for us will be seeing people return with their spend, to spend more with us month on month as they learn about the environment and they learn about what audiences and environments work best for them. For me, this would be way more long term, about creating this environment that is the preferred one, rather than specifically bringing out and talking to people as a specific call to action.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I think that's the right way to go as well. And I think a lot of our attendees have actually asked questions about monetization. If you don't mind, maybe I'll just take a stab at one of the questions from Sharon about how SCMP monetizes blog content. So I think if you were here for the early part of the presentation, Sharon, you would have seen Ian actually define how that the blocking of certain keywords is not ideal. It's a bit of a blunt instrument. So if we have actually a better tool, which in this case, we work together with the actual content creators, in this case, the editors, the journalists, and I think there's another question from Anonymous. Well, why don't you share your name? But, there's another question about how we would actually balance out this monetization strategy, content, with sponsored content, as well as like editorial. I would say that overall, there isn't really a difference whether it's sponsored or not sponsored. I think what's important is the sentiment expressed inside this particular content and article. Because if we come back to Sharon's question, if it is blocked, it never gets a chance to be monetized because there is no ads that will be put against it as it is deemed not brand safe. And therefore, we would not be able to have that, whether it's a CPM costing or CPC, whichever pricing model you want to look at, it's not placed alongside that content, and therefore it is less monetization for the publisher. So if we want to talk about monetizing block content, I think we have to change the question in the sense that it's no longer blocked because now the sentiment allows it to be seen as more positive than something that is just blindly blocked. Ian, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question and something that all publishers will have to think about right now. So to be really clear, in order for it to get blocked, it needs to have hit one of the keywords that the brand safety blockers have in their list. Now, not everybody buys with the same list. Not everybody uses a brand safety blocker. So even content that may be blocked for one advertiser may not be blocked by another. So a publisher like SCMP or any other would still be able to recognize some value for it, but there would be less competition for that space. And when there's less competition, then the value for those ads goes down. And we can see quite a significant decline in value for those articles, which is a real problem for all publishers. However, if we take a step back and we say, okay, that one word is a good way to block for a lot of sites. If you want to do a fairly big campaign, you want to be over thousands of different websites, and you want to just be able to set it and forget it and know that you're going to be reasonably safe. Using a keyword blocking system works. But if you have a relationship with a publisher and you can say to them, hey, I am this brand, these are the things I care about, this is the environments I would like to be in, and here's stuff that I just don't think is appropriate for my brand, then you can, through that conversation, have a much more precise way of saying, okay, this one's no, but this is totally fine, and this one's amazing for me. As like any other optimization that a publisher would be able to do for you, they'll be able to get you into the best possible spaces, into the most performant areas, and reach the maximum audience possible through having that one-to-one relationship. So I would say that it's not quite black and white. It's not one size fits all. But it is a problem that is persistent across all publishers. And the more we can get people to question whether or not, for those direct relationships, for those specific site buys, whether or not they should or need to block these things or not, that's a good conversation to open up.
Great. And just in the concerning about the time limit, we just have a couple of questions more that we would take. So Ian, one more for you is with data privacy changing globally, does this give you the challenge to collect data that will help with your content strategy?
Oh, cool. That's a really good question. So this is an amazing thing for us from a data point of view, because we get to say things like, this user prefers this kind of content in this tone of voice. They prefer, like college graduate content that is really positive for this type of content, or they prefer really easy to read content for like that basketball stuff. And we get to create much richer profiles for users. And that can be used for programmatic targeting as much as it can be used for a content-based thing. So our Morning Studio team, who are our branded content team here, can respond to briefs and say, okay, we want to talk to this person because we know everything about them. We know how they like to read articles, what time of day, what their interests are, And so developing these tools can absolutely help you to develop a more rounded understanding of who your users are. And SCMP will use this additionally for, as I think I briefly touched on, our funnel science. And funnel science first means, can we tell the difference between a really heavily engaged user that comes back to us every day and reads loads of articles versus that flyby user that reads one article that they found on a social media platform? And how do we migrate more of those one and dones into these heavy readers that come to us all the time? And by understanding what helps people get engaged, spend longer, how we can promote content that is more relevant to them, all of this stuff can come out of those kind of learnings that we've built through readability, sentiment, and context. It's a really great way of building out your data.
Funnel science is exactly what a lot of marketers and agencies are looking for results in their campaigns. So that's good to know. Just these last two questions I'm combining into one. We have a question from the audience to ask, was it difficult to get the journalists to implement this sort of tracking on their content? And secondly, is there an expectation now for these journalists to sort of skew the content more positive?
Yeah, so amazing questions. So whenever there's a change, there's an education that needs to take place. And the important thing here is that it doesn't change our values for truth and fairness. It doesn't change the fact that the way that they write. They're just more aware of how what they write may be perceived. And it allows them to say, I intended this. What does this AI tool suggest that I've achieved? Does it match my expectations? At SCMP, we talk about trying to make all of our staff bionic. This is not computer first. This is the best of both. This is being able to say, I will take all of my human knowledge, but also reference and check and speed up because I have some extra technology on the side. We think that just makes people stronger and faster and more accurate. It doesn't dictate or change the way that we write.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's always that church and state as well. We would never dare to tell the journalists what to do, just get shot. So I think with that, before I hand it back to Laura, I just have one last question to leave with the audience. I think a lot of people have heard about change during this pandemic. Do you have like just one tip that you could leave with everyone on how best to drive digital transformation when there's market uncertainty?
Oh, wow. Yeah. So the one thing is communicate. Talk to your peers, to your cohorts, to your colleagues, and understand the issues that are affecting them and how, and try to understand how you could make that better. We as a collective are a powerful, interesting, vibrant bunch, and together we can really drive a lot of change. So I would wholly encourage everyone to talk more, use facilities like the IAB to share information, and stay positive because what we do is amazing and important. And so, yeah, I would say communicate and stay positive. That's the key.
Excellent. Great advice. Thank you so much, Ian. And thank you, everyone. You've been a great audience. With that, I hand it over to Laura. I know she's got many plugs from Ian about IAB for this session. So, Laura, please leverage on that.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Dawn. That was really, excuse me, that was really interesting just to see the journey that you guys have been on. Thank you for being so open to some of the questions from the audience. And it's really great to see that people were participating actively. Thank you. For those that had asked, yes, the slides will be available post this. You will all be receiving an email where you'll be asked to give your feedback so that we can continue to iterate on what we do here at the IAB. Please do stay tuned to our newsletters to see our next upcoming webinars that we've got in the pipeline for you. Thank you all very, very much, and I will see you at our next webinar.
Thanks, Laura, for organizing.